Craig, whenever you're ready.
Okay, folks, I want to welcome everybody to the May 13th edition, or I'm sorry, the May edition of the Airport Commission meeting. Before we get the festivities underway, I apologize for not having my video on, but I will be rejoining shortly with the video on. Want to remind everybody that there are multiple opportunities for public comment. And first up, if there was any public comment on an agenda item, on an item that is not on the agenda tonight, not on the agenda, but within the purview of the Airport Commission, then we will tackle those at the beginning of the meeting. And so if you have, if any of the public attending has such a question or such a comment, then please raise your hand and Mo will recognize you, and at the appropriate time, we will ask for your comments. And we just ask that you respect all the other speakers and the course of the meeting and restrict those comments to 3 minutes. Yeah, we'll give you a little bit of buffer there, but 3 minutes doesn't mean 7. And then also on each agendized item, there will be an opportunity for public comment as well. And I will call for that, and Mo will then look for the raised hands. So I think with that, we are ready to go. So Mo, I would like to call the May 19th Airport Commission meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Okay. Commissioner Hopkins.
Present.
Commissioner Goodman.
Present.
Commissioner Houghton.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Wilson, I think your mic is not on.
I've got a green button here.
There you go. So you're here.
Okay, I am here.
Great. Vice Chair Bowen.
Present.
Commissioner Reed has been excused for the evening. And do we have Chair Arcuri here?
Chair Arcuri is here.
Okay, great. We have a quorum.
Okay, thanks, Mo. And do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Arcuri, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, terrific. And then next up, notices that on Thursday, May 13th, 2021 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board of the Airport Commission. I'm sorry, the bulletin board of the Airport Administration. Mo, this would be in public. This is the time for any public comment on an item reminding you not on the agenda tonight. And so Mo, if you would ask anybody to raise their hand which would like to do so.
Okay. We have one member of the public with us right now. And if you would use the raised hand icon to indicate if you'd like to make public comment, that would be great. And Commissioner Arcuri, seeing no raised hand.
Alrighty, well, we have a full house with one member of the public. And I'm expecting we might have a few more later. But moving on then to liaison reports, do we have Councilmember Eric Friedman with us from Santa Barbara?
Chair Arcuri, I haven't seen him come into the meeting yet. We do have Kyle Richards here.
Okay, well then we'll pass over Eric if he comes. We'll give him an opportunity later. And then do we have any report from the Goleta Liaison Council member, Kyle Richards?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you tonight. Nothing to report from Goleta except the fact that we're very happy to see the sun out again today in the good land. So, nice to see you all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's, I keep thinking somebody's going to break into the sun is out tomorrow, but maybe not tonight. Definitely not me. Alrighty, well then we'll move on to item number 4, the director's report. Take it away, Mr. Thompson.
Good evening, commissioners. You're joined with just myself and Aaron Keller, operations manager this evening. Deanna Zackerson is out of the office handling a family emergency. But we will continue with tonight's agenda. The airport continues to move towards recovery from the downturn in activity resulting from the pandemic of this past year. While this month's passenger count report shows a significant increase in business compared to April of 2020, which was the start of the pandemic, when you compare it to April 21, our business is up significantly. But the more relevant comparison is when you compare April of 21 with April of 2019, which was our record year. In comparison, we are 30% below where we were in 2019. That's a marked improvement in our passenger activity just in a few short months of this year. And we've already began to see further improvements in the month of May. So with the summer schedule coming up very shortly here, it's likely that we will exceed our 2019 record year this summer. So a lot of good business returning to the airport, and we're happy to see it. The additional passenger activity does come with some challenges to try and meet the demand. Specifically, we've seen our long and short-term parking lots at the terminal fill up over the weekend, and that's going to result in us having to open up the Hollister remote lot probably starting this weekend for employees, and then sometime next week, we'll begin shuttling overflow passengers into that lot as well. And then further activity coming in the month of June, United Airlines will be launching nonstop service to Chicago O'Hare Airport. And then Alaska will also be launching service to San Diego. So even more activity coming. But we're going to continue to manage the growth in the activity and provide the highest level of service that we're able to provide. Staff presented our fiscal year 2022 operating and capital budget to City Council on May the 3rd. While the council had a few questions about operational activity at the airport, they had no significant concerns about the budget that we presented. So that is moving forward. At the January Commission meeting, we shared with you our work plan for 2021. As business continues to recover from the pandemic, we're focused on addressing a number of key projects. And just to remind you of a few things that we have coming up, we continue to work, as you know, on flight instruction minimum standards. Tonight, we're going to share with you again our progress on that effort. And while this is not the most pressing issue at the airport, it does take up considerable staff time just managing that effort alone. We're also now going to begin issuing solicitation requests to address lease or contract needs, specifically for the terminal news and gift shop. We'll be issuing an RFP for that. We will also be issuing an RFI to determine the level of interest in full service flight schools at the airport. And we're doing that in concert with the other independent flight instruction and flight club assessments that we're doing. We will also be entering lease negotiations with our airlines, and we're also going to have lease discussions with the rental car agencies as well. So a lot of heavy lifting with those two agreements coming up this year. And then we're going to be executing FBO lease extensions that we've already shared with you. And these leases are a precursor for the required movements and balancing of space so that we can begin the redevelopment work that needs to follow. So a lot of work ahead of us this year, and this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the major efforts that we have coming up. We're doing all of this with the shortage of staff. We've still not filled our airport planning position. Our facility manager position is still vacant, but we're coming close. And then our supervising engineering position is vacant as well. So we're all busy here. We have our hands full, and we're keeping things going as smoothly as possible. So with that, I'll hand it over to Aaron if you have anything more to add.
Certainly. Thank you, Henry. So good evening, commissioners, and to the public. Wanted to share with you that, as I was joking a little bit earlier, I may appear a little red as I've been out in the sun. We've been conducting our annual FAA certification inspection. It's been done a little bit differently this year than in years past, where we had an administrative component that occurred a few months ago, and then the physical component, which occurred yesterday. Overall, I'm happy to report the FAA is pleased with the way that the airport operations team, maintenance team, facilities team is operating the facility. But with that, there's always room for improvement, and I think constant improvement is something that we should all strive for. So no glaring deficiencies, but I'm happy to report that the inspection has concluded at this point, and we look forward to seeing their feedback. So thank you.
And with that, that concludes the director's report.
Okay, thank you, Director Thompson and Aaron as well. Mo, would you see if we have any public comment on the director's report item? And I will ask for Airport Commission questions.
Member of the public, if you would like to make comments on the director's report, please use the raised hand icon on your webinar screen. And Chair Arcuri, there is no raised hand.
Okay, and if we still have one member, I suppose that would be raised hand versus raised hands. Thanks for that. And commission members, do any members of the commission have any questions on the director's report? And why don't we just kind of go down by order here. Carl Hopkins, do you?
Yes, I do. Director Thompson, I want to make sure I understood what seemed like incredibly good news. I believe in 2019, we came just shy of 1 million enplanements. Did I understand you to say that you think we're going to hit that number this year, or is it just that the summer months will hit the summer months?
The summer months will hit the summer months, but the judge is still out for the end of year results where we're really heating up, and it's entirely possible that we might, reach or beat our total 2019 year as well. A lot's going to depend upon how we perform in the fall. Right now, there's a lot of travel demand out there. If that keeps up throughout the remainder of this year, then certainly we're gonna reach or exceed 2019.
That would be fantastic, because everything you read talks about 23, 22, luckily 23, sometimes 24. So it sounds like fantastic news. Thank you.
Yes.
Alrighty, Commissioner Goodman, do you have any questions for the director?
No, I do not.
Alrighty, and I know Commissioner Reed is not with us. Commissioner Houghton, do you?
Yes, just a quick question to Mr. Thompson. I had the pleasure of flying on Southwest to Las Vegas on May 7 and 10, and I must say that the plane to Las Vegas was nearly full, and I think there was some 77 people on the return flight. Are you hearing anything from Southwest, if they're happy, or any feedback there yet?
Yes, sir. They're very pleased with their performance out of Santa Barbara. The Las Vegas route is performing the best out of the three. They're looking at, you know, potentially more growth if we continue, you know, on this path. So the message from them is they're very pleased with what they're seeing.
Great, thank you.
And Commissioner Wilson
No questions at this point. Thank you.
and Vice Chair Bowen.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions, or really one quick question. But first off, congratulations on the airline traffic picking up. That's the real big issue at our airport. Much smaller issue, you mentioned the RFP going out for flight schools. Can you elaborate on that a little bit at this time, or is it too soon?
You know, I can elaborate a little bit more. It's first what we call an RFI, which is a request for information rather than a request for proposal. And the objective is to gauge the amount of interest and just determine some of the provisions that we may include in an RFP process based upon what we gather from the interest that's expressed.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, and thanks, Commissioner Bowen. And I don't have any questions, Director Thompson. Thanks for an awesome report. And with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar, item number 5. And I'd like to remind everybody that items on the consent calendar are really considered very typical routine business that the various staff members at the airport who are responsible for each of those areas handle as their really normal course of business. So what I'm going to do is read each item sequentially, and rather than go through them individually, I'll read each item as it appears on the agenda. I will ask if there's any public comment on the consent and any item on the consent calendar. And I will then ask if there's any comment or questions from the airport commissioners. And if that all goes through smoothly with no real questions, then we'll make a motion, or I'll look for a motion to approve the consent, all the items on the consent calendar. If we need to go through them individually, we certainly can. So item number 5, or the first item on the consent calendar, is a recommendation that the airport waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission meeting that was held on Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. And furthermore, that the airport commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the budget subcommittee meeting that occurred on Monday, April 19th, 2021. The second item on the consent calendar, or item number 6 on the agenda, that the airport commission receive the monthly airport property management report for April 2021. The third item, and item number 7 on the agenda, is the lease agreement with Amgen LLC, and the recommendation that the airport commission approve and authorize the airport director to execute a 2-year lease agreement with one-year option to extend with Amgen LLC, a California limited liability company, for approximately 1,628 square feet of building 315 Unit D and 2,135 square feet of paved, fenced land and surrounding parking areas at 90 Dean Arnold Place, effective May 1st, 2021, for a monthly rental of $3,409, exclusive of utilities. And last, but certainly not least, the fourth item on the consent calendar, or item number 8 on the agenda, the lease agreement with Ian D. Kaminsky, PhD and MFT, which I believe is, I forget what the M stands for, but family therapist. I was just thinking running an airport probably requires a lot of therapy, but that's an editorial comment. Anyway, the recommendation that the airport commission approve and authorize the airport director to execute a 2-year lease agreement with 2 one-year options to extend with Ian D. Kaminsky, PhD, MFT, for approximately 560 square feet, a building 258 Unit B at 629 Firestone Road, effective June 1st, 2021, for a monthly rental of $952, exclusive of utilities and common area maintenance CAM charges. So those are the 4 items on our consent calendar. Mo, could you ask the member of the public, or members of the public as it may be, if there are any speakers that would like to speak on the consent calendar?
There is one member of the public, and if you wish to speak on this item, please use your raised hand icon to indicate you would like to. And Chair R. Curry, there is no raised hand icon.
Okay, then I'll move to the airport commissioners. And again, I'll do that. I'm sorry, I'm flipping through papers here in the order they appear on my memo here. So Commissioner Hopkins, do you have anything?
No questions.
Commissioner Goodman?
No questions.
Commissioner Reed is not with us tonight. Commissioner Houghton?
No question.
Commissioner Wilson?
No questions.
Vice Chair Bowen?
No questions.
Alrighty, and I do not have any questions. So, without a drum roll, I'd love to hear someone make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
This is Commissioner Hopkins. I move that we approve the consent calendar as read.
Awesome, and it looked like Commissioner Houghton was next on the buzzer.
Well, then I second that motion.
Alrighty, so let's do a quick roll call vote. Commissioner Hopkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodman,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bowen,
Aye.
and Chair Arcuri, whose face is not here, but I'm here for sure. Aye. Awesome. So now I think we'll move on to item number 9, the administrative report on the Airport Noise Advisory Program update and recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a report regarding the status and current work plan of the Airport Noise Advisory Program and an overview of the 2020 SBA Aircraft Noise Report. I'm assuming that will be given by Aaron, but I could be wrong, but whoever it is, take it away.
Good evening, Commissioners. Item number 9 on tonight's agenda is an update on our efforts to address complaints related to aircraft noise. The airport commits a significant amount of resources addressing these issues, including frequent communication with users of the airport on the need to avoid noise-sensitive areas within the vicinity of the airport whenever possible. All noise complaints received involved aircraft that are landing at the airport or in the flight pattern approaching the airport's runways. These aircraft are in flight, under control of air traffic control, and in a critical phase of flight. Because safety of flight is the highest priority, there is no magic bullet solution that makes this issue disappear. However, we strive to manage and reduce the impacts. In today's update, we have provided you with the first edition of the Airport Noise Report, which is designed to educate and inform our community on issues related to aircraft noise. This report also includes details and statistics on specific efforts taken by the airport to manage aircraft noise events. We continue to work with our users and the FAA to improve the situation through actively monitoring, researching, pursuing any activity that appears to be inconsistent with our objectives or is unsafe. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kelly Reed, who will present the noise update.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, members of the public. I'm glad to get to present to you tonight. I'm going to give you an update on where our noise advisory program is and give you an overview of the report that we've put out for your review. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a quick overview of what I'm going to cover. On the next slide, we will look at the noise complaint histogram, which is the report that we provide monthly. It's the previous month's noise data in a snapshot to give you an idea of where we're at. I'll then review the airport noise report for you. I do want to explain that we have seen in 2020, we had a decrease in noise complaint activity compared to 2019 data, largely just due to the fact that we had such a reduction in service. However, we did start to see those numbers increase as flights have come back. I'm going to talk a little bit about the coordination and collaboration we've been undergoing with Southwest, both prior to their implementation and service launch at Santa Barbara and after. And then talk a little bit about our work plan. We have a noise specific work plan, and I'll go over some of our key accomplishments and some of the projects that we still work on. And then lastly, the RNAV visual approach that we have proposed to the FAA and are working with them on. Next slide, please, Mo. So this is the April 2021 aircraft noise histogram. You should be pretty familiar with seeing this. This is what we provide for the director's report monthly. It breaks down our noise complaints by community. So when community members provide a complaint, either through our public view system or through our hotline, it all goes into one system, and then we break it down by community to see where the greatest potential impact is as we move forward and educate our aircraft operators. So you do see 476 total complaints for April, which is a dramatic increase over what we saw the last few months of this year. Not quite double, but almost. I believe we had 267 noise complaints in March. So definitely we've been slowly on the rise, and we see that trend continuing. Next slide, please. So just a basic summary of our noise report. You do see a link there at the bottom to be able to view that report. It's been published on our Noise Advisory Program website, so that's available for public review. Essentially, we started off going over some airport noise education, explaining what the noise goals are for our program. That's historic goals and goals that we continue to strive to meet. Information about public view, what that system is, and how we utilize that to pair flight activity to community constituent complaints. And then some basic information about the airport, a diagram of the airport layout, and aircraft information. So we included hyperlinks that people can select to view what a 737 looks like or what a Cessna 172. So for those that might not be familiar, it gives them some idea if they're seeing an airplane flying overhead, they can then identify, oh, that's a general aviation aircraft or that's a Gulfstream. So just some basic information. We included some statistics as well, including kind of a review through the statistics of the COVID-19 pandemic impact to our noise program. So there's monthly totals for 2020 in the report, as well as some annual totals for the last 6 years, noise data, total data, so you can see that impact. You can see that we had a significant number of complaints early in 2020, and the number dramatically dropped in April, and then we saw a slow increase. I will say we've seen some new callers, new complainants who are now working from home and experiencing noise that they didn't pre-COVID. So we have had some newer involvement in our program. And then our work plan, we'll go over that a little bit, a few slides down. And then we also have some resources that we've provided in public meetings that we've held before. So quick facts that lay out exactly what we can and can't do as an airport based on FAA guidance and regulation. Frequently asked questions that we get. It's a lengthier document, but provides a lot of really detailed information for people that want to understand what we do and why and how we are regulated the way we are. And then lastly in the report is noise contours. We provided data from 2017 forward. And there's 2 views per year. So you can see that there's been very, very little change to the overall noise contour of the airport. The report also goes into what a noise contour is and how we utilize that. But essentially it graphically shows the noise impact of aircraft taking off and landing from the airport and how loudly you hear that level based on a cumulative noise level where you are. So the closer you are to the airport, clearly the louder you're going to hear it. The further away you go, the quieter it is. So we've got a lot of visuals in there for you on that. Next slide, please. So just an overview on the outreach and the partnership that we've had with Southwest specific to aircraft noise and their participation in our voluntary noise abatement approach. We began coordinating with Southwest when they first came out and expressed significant interest. We advised them of our voluntary noise abatement procedures. and they've been great partners, very supportive, and seeking their own solutions to do their best to fly that approach. That said, it is a 737 aircraft. It is one of the fastest aircraft that approach the airport, and their safety specifications are a little bit different than a regional jet. So we've had a in-depth conversation with them. Our operations staff partnered with air traffic control at the airport, and we met in person with Southwest prior to their launch, and basically stepped them through what our noise program is, how we are going to ask them to fly that approach, what the common instrument approaches are into the airport, hotspots around the airport. Really just gave them a thorough overview of what we do and how we do it. And they were very receptive, and they, like I said, they've been just outstanding to work with. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. They are working with us in requesting or proposing to the FAA to create a visual RNAV approach that we'll talk about at the end here. Next slide, please. So our work plan, definitely hard to read that in the small print, but the work plan is in the report. You can look through that at length, but I'll just go over some of the key accomplishments that we've seen in the last year and a half, 2 years. Next slide, please. So first, we completed upgrade and reactivation of our noise monitors. So we had some aged equipment that was stopping. The reliability of the equipment had aged. It wasn't reliable anymore. A couple years ago, we transitioned into utilizing noise contours to be able to get the same data that we were getting from our noise monitors. However, we saw the need and the value to return those noise monitors to service. So we received approval from City Council and completed that last summer. They've been up and operational, and definitely confirming that the noise contour information that we continue to receive is accurate based on the actual sound captured from aircraft that are the average sound levels that we experience. We revised our Airport Noise Advisory Program website, which is usable both for public and aircraft operators trying to understand what our program is. We refined and updated the noise abatement approach visuals, and I'll show you those in a slide or two, just in case you haven't seen them. The ones that we had been using were over 15 years old and just dated. They showed the Santa Barbara Goleta area from 15 years ago, so we wanted to update those to give it an accurate representation of what a pilot would see as they fly in. Additionally, we launched Public View, which is the public-facing portal of our noise program, Environmental View. And that's where public can go in and enter their noise complaints, watch flight activity, find out what flight flew over their house, and also get the follow-up information when they issue a noise complaint and see what action the airport took and what the cause of the overflight was. And then I mentioned Southwest. So Alaska Airlines implemented their own proprietary RNAV approach. So what we're pursuing with Southwest and the FAA will be very similar to what Alaska is doing. But Alaska has a proprietary approach that's for their use only. But we do absolutely appreciate their participation and their support and ability to be able to encompass the runway 25 noise approach into their approach procedures. They did start off only being able to utilize that in their 737 aircraft, but they've now incorporated it in the Embraer aircraft as well, more of the regional, the smaller aircraft. So we're very grateful for their participation and their continued support of our program. And lastly, we've been continuing a formal request with the FAA to have some sort of published noise abatement procedure. And I'll go over that at the end with our NAV information. Next slide, please. So here I've got a visual for our runway 25 voluntary noise abatement procedure. And we do include that information about voluntary because participation is voluntary. The FAA does not let airports mandate noise abatement procedures because safety of the aircraft in flight is number one. So it is voluntary, but we find that most aircraft operators are very willing once they've been educated to fly these procedures. So what you see here is the yellow area are our noise sensitive communities in close proximity to the airport. The airport you can see there is smaller. It's a little left of center. You can see the pavement, you can see kind of see the runways. But what we ask is that aircraft, when they're approaching that, they make a 2.5 mile left base to final turn over the Moore Mesa open space. So we've highlighted that area in that bright green color to indicate this is the area we want them to aim for as they approach the runway. Next slide, please. And then our noise abatement procedures for general aviation aircraft or for visual flight rules, VFR aircraft, are a little different. Those aircraft are usually arriving to the airport and landing on runway 15 left or runway 15 right. Those are our general aviation runways. They're shorter runways, and our voluntary approach associated with those aircraft is to overfly the 101 whenever safety allows. And that includes coming up the coast, down the coast, and then as they turn base to final onto the runways, they may veer from that to be able to line up with the runways. So our procedures haven't changed, but we updated our visuals to, again, give a more comprehensive view of what the area looks like now. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just wanted to give you an overview of the request to the FAA, which is now an RNAV visual approach that we've been requesting. And this is what Southwest is working with us towards. Initially, we had requested a visual approach, a charted visual approach to the airport. However, the FAA denied that due to the fact that when you have a charted visual approach, you need some sort of visually identifiable object or a reference point. And as these aircraft are coming in over the ocean, there is no reference point over the ocean. So they weren't able to do a charted visual. However, we are hopeful, very hopeful that we will be able to move forward with a RNAV visual approach, which essentially combines a coordinated approach that utilizes waypoints till the aircraft gets close to the airport, and then they would assume a visual approach to landing short final as they do now. So we've officially put our information into the FAA portal. We're in support of the plans that Southwest has brought forward for that. And we await further information currently from the FAA to see if it's looking feasible and if they're going to be able to start some feasibility studies to develop this. One extraordinary benefit to this approach is that it will not be proprietary to Southwest. It will be publicly available. So aircraft operators who can utilize the RNAV technology can absolutely utilize this approach when and if it's approved. And that pretty much wraps it up, I believe. I'm happy to take any questions if they come up.
Oh, sorry, Mo. Thank you, Kelly. And by the way, I apologize from the beginning of not acknowledging that you were going to be giving the report. But thank you very much for that. I think first up is soliciting public comment. I'm assuming we may have some, so I'll give you a moment to ask for that. And I would just remind the public that please limit those to 3 minutes. And there's a little timer that'll be on the screen that'll kind of give you an indication of how much time you have left.
Okay, I have one raised hand. Members of the public, if there's anybody else who wishes to comment, would you please raise your hand icon? Chair our Curry, Vincent Merstick has raised his hand.
Okay. And do we have, is just one Mo, or do we have more?
Just
okay.
one.
Go ahead, Vince, you have the floor. Vince, not sure if you're muted or you can hear us, but if you meant to raise your hand for public comment on the statement. Are you there, Vince?
Says I'm not muted.
Oh, there you go. We heard you there for a minute. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Go ahead. You have your 3 minutes.
I think there may be a technical problem here because earlier it was announced that there was only one or so people viewing. And I noticed that if you go to the standard process to join the meeting, you go to the website that's set up, you cannot click on the link to join the meeting. And what you have to do is write down 54 characters and enter those by hand. So perhaps somebody could look into that and see what the difficulty is. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, Mo, do we have any raised hands on the noise abatement item?
We do not.
Already? And then let's see if our airport commissioners have any questions or comments, starting with Commissioner Hopkins.
No questions or comments. Thank you very much. It was an excellent report.
Commissioner Goodman,
Yeah, no, I don't have any. Thank you.
Commissioner Houghton,
Just a comment, I must say, the work you have done with Southwest is exemplary. I live on the Mesa at 320 feet and I see them offshore. I see Alaska Airlines offshore and I see United Airlines offshore, but the remaining airline seems to buzz the Mesa. So you may want to focus on American Airlines in the near future. Thank you.
and Commissioner Wilson.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for the report, and it leaves me without any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Bowen.
Thank you, Kelly. Also, no questions.
All right, and myself, Kelly, did I understand you to say that, so you said there, I believe you said at the beginning there was a dramatic rise. Is that, A, did you say that? And if you did, B, what was that in comparison to? What time period?
A dramatic rise this year, yes. In the last month, we've seen a dramatic rise as our air service is starting to ramp up, as our air carrier operations are increasing, the noise complaints are as well. So in March, we had 267 total noise complaints. April, we had 476.
And is
February,
it the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
February was 276 complaints, I believe, and 172 in January. So we've had a slow progression and then a bigger jump in the last month.
And is it, and this question is either for Director Thompson or yourself, Kelly, is that COVID related, meaning as airlines are returning service, there's obviously more flights, therefore more complaints, or is that more additional carriers that have started serving the airport?
We've definitely seen an increase in flights overall in the past month to 6 weeks. So I believe it's a combination of the two.
Okay. All right, thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Chair Curry,
Yes?
Kyle Richards has been raising his hands.
Ah, okay. Kyle, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I actually, as a panelist, I don't have a raise hand function, so I was manually raising my hand.
Oh, I didn't see you there. I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to fire out.
I appreciate the opportunity. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't address this issue. As a Goleta City Council representative, you know, this is an issue that we hear a lot about, the noise from the airport, since we surround it on three sides. I want to thank Ms. Reed for the report. This was very informative and educational. A few comments and questions just to bring up. First of all, I want to make note that, you know, we have a City Assist online portal where residents can give us their complaints or suggestions or report issues, you know, anywhere from roads to parks to whatever. We added a airport noise complaint addition because we get so many of them. I just want to confirm, do we have a mechanism set up that you are receiving these complaints once we get them? If not, I can make sure I'll follow up with our staff to confirm what we do with those complaints, because I've assumed that we pass them along to you, but perhaps we don't. So can you just clarify if do you know if you receive the complaints that we get?
I know we've received a few over the years, but not a significant number. So that's news to me. I did not know that. That's outstanding that you guys have that ability to support the community. And it'd be great if we could work out a partnership so that we're getting all of those to ensure that we are entering the information as well, if they're coming to you and to us.
Yeah, we don't necessarily encourage them to come to us, and when they do, we try to make sure that they know who to give them to. But if you're going online, you know, it's at least an option for people to mention that if that's the issue that they're trying to report to us. Another question that I had was regarding, you had mentioned that you had updated some of the maps and the visual images of what the cities look like, you know, given that there's been some development in recent years. On the map that you showed us, showing the noise sensitive areas, I happen to know that there's a development in Old Town, the Winslow development. It's 175 units off of Kellogg that didn't seem to appear on that map. So I just want to make sure that you do have the most current maps, because there's a new development that is in there that I didn't see listed on that. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that you know that there may be some missing piece to that.
We will take a closer look at that. We generally aimed to cover populated areas, but I will take a closer look at that.
So it's 175 units, and it's basically due east of the airport runway. It's right off of Kellogg, South Kellogg Avenue. So please do follow up with that. And then, well, there was something else that I was going to mention, but let's see. Anyway, I do think, oh, is there I saw in the PowerPoint presentation a link to the website to get the full report. Is it possible to send me the full report, or at least send me the PowerPoint presentation, because I didn't know where to get that. So that would be very helpful if you wouldn't mind sharing that. I'd appreciate it. Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, I think that was it. So thank you very much. I do appreciate this discussion and your attention to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Richards. And with that, we'll move on to the final agenda item. That's item number 10, and the recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a staff presentation regarding the task force working group related to flight instruction for the update of the SBA minimum standards document.
Commissioners, item number 10 on tonight's agenda is a continuation of staff's efforts to keep you informed on the progress being made on the minimum standards updates related to flight instruction. As we have discussed, staff is committed to ensuring you are kept up to date in real time as we do the work to develop improved policy for flight instruction activity at the airport. In tonight's presentation, we will share with you progress made with the task force group, an important additional layer of the outreach we have provided for stakeholders to have the opportunity to be heard and to address their concerns amongst each other. It is important to keep in mind that the objectives of this task force is to bring together the three groups on the airport that provide some level of flight instruction so that they can all collectively understand the needs and concerns of each other. And we are attempting to develop a system in which they can coexist. I believe such a system exists, but we're going to have to get those folks on the same page. Through this work, one of our objectives is to ensure we're providing the needed service that our users need at the airport. Users of this service will have the opportunity to express their concerns, provide input throughout the outreach process and a number of upcoming meetings. And then finally, there seems to be some confusion as to staff's motives to try and address issues of fairness and equality through attempting to provide a level playing field. To add some clarity, we have been attempting to address these issues for more than 4 years now. The need to improve our rules is driven by infighting amongst the providers of these services and allegations of unequal treatment, which is a violation of our grant assurances. And so a level playing field is not an arbitrary term that we use. It's not something we, the staff, even made up, but rather it's a situation in which everyone has a fair and equal chance of succeeding. This is fundamental in FAA policy and something that airports must aspire to reach. As an airport, we're fortunate to have the number of options available for flight instruction that we do have on the airport. Having these options provides users with the ability to pick and choose which method of instruction they prefer. For the providers of flight instruction at the airport to coexist, there must be rules governing this activity that ensures fairness and equality. Rules must be enforceable and not benefit one group over the other. I would also add that the concept of a level playing field does not mean that we will be able to divide this line of business into 3 nice equal portions, but rather that we will provide an opportunity again for all of the interested groups to be successful. Finally, while it might be true that we have operated under the existing conditions for quite some time, that doesn't mean that it's fair, and that doesn't mean that it's right. We're attempting to address the issue of flight instruction because there have been complaints filed, allegations of potential economic discrimination amongst the providers, which is unjust and cannot be defended by the airport. Therefore, rules must be developed to level the playing field to avoid any unjust discrimination. And, you know, as we mentioned at the onset, it's important that we have these discussions and that the commission is engaged in this process along the way because we're moving through with a focus on coming up with a solution that we will take to council later on this year. And so understanding and having, you know, a concept of where we're headed, I think is fundamental for the role that you play in getting us to updating the minimum standards. So with that, Aaron's gonna share the latest update that we have, which is promising. Aaron?
Thank you, Henry. Good evening again, commissioners. I'm happy to join you here from my office. So very pleased to see you all tonight. With that being said, next slide. So I just wanted to first touch on the task force. What is the membership? But before I get into the membership, I just want to focus on our first meeting, which I'll get into in a moment. The individuals that you see on the screen here today all came together in a very collaborative manner. And I feel like we have kicked this off to a very good and positive start. We need to re-examine what we're doing, why we're doing it, and as Henry alluded to, what do the users of the airport need? And these individuals who are providing these services and or opportunities for flight on the airport are really the experts when it comes to knowing how these operate in a commercial service capacity. And that's the focus that I'd like us to all keep in mind as we continue this conversation tonight. You know, this is about commercial services on airports that are regulated by airport minimum standards. Airport minimum standards are really what lays the groundwork for how an airport intends to comply with the grant assurances that Henry alluded to. So please keep that kind of at the front of your mind as we continue this discussion today. So just kind of running through the group real quick, we've retained Aviation Management Consulting Group, Mr. Bob Trimborn, as I alluded to. He's the one who facilitated the prior 3 stakeholder meetings and has been essentially guiding the airport with his knowledge of FAA guidance over the years. If you don't recall from prior meetings, he spent many years back to 1983 when he first entered at various facilities. He was airport director at Santa Monica Airport. He was at the Reno Stansted Airport. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, where the air races are. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge, and we really rely on his expertise. So I'm actually quite honored, I will say, to work with Bob under his mentorship and learn from him along the way as to how we can best focus our operations at Santa Barbara in a fair, compliant, and just manner. Clearly on the SBA administration side, you've got Henry, myself, Quinn Martinez, who I don't know if you've met yet. He is our operations supervisor of 139 compliance, really our safety compliance supervisor. He's out there as well. He's also participated heavily in the audit process as we've looked at what exactly is occurring on the facility and where do we need to direct our focus. And then finally, Miss Melissa Garcia, she's the operations technician for our facility, and she plays a very heavy support role for our operations and law enforcement division. So very pleased to work with this group. FAA was invited, however, there was no direct representation sent to this initial task force meeting. But again, keep in mind what I alluded to. The FAA looks to the airports to handle these issues locally. So unless they're being forced to the table, and I use that word loosely, they're going to rely on us to fix this. And that's why Henry has shared with you that we really need commission involvement, because this is a local issue. And when a complaint is filed, they'll bring it to our attention. We will take action, but they expect us to fix these issues locally. And then we had two invitations go out to our independent flight instructors, Mr. Mike Fontaine and Mr. Devin Darrenfield. Mr. Darrenfield was not able to be present at the meeting, but we had Mr. Fontaine to represent the flight instructor group. And then we also had from the flight schools, Ms. Sean and Mr. Joel Sullivan. And then from each independent flying club that we have on the airport, Mr. Erwin Green and Mr. Justin Robertson. And then for the Santa Barbara Flying Club, Mr. Daryl Eaton and Mr. David Williams. Next slide, please. So again, this was a slide that came out of that initial task force working group that Mr. Trimborn put together. He felt we didn't have it fully defined. What is each group and what is the FAA's view or definition? And I'm not going to read this off verbatim to you, but what is a flight school? It's someone who leases or subleases and or participates in improvement on airport to provide flight training through a financial service obligation to the airport. That's what a flight school is. It's the traditional form of flight instruction. And then we have the independent flight instructors, which has come out of the FAA Federal Register notice that updated what they could and could not do on the airport. Yes, they've been around for some period of time. And we had looked at, is this the right form of instruction on airport? What the FAA told us was, yes, you need to be able to have independent flight instructors continue to provide that service. So again, as Henry has alluded to, we believe that all three can coexist based upon that notion that the FAA has provided us. But it's important to note that they just provide flight training services, but they do not lease or sublease land or necessarily contribute as consequentially to the improvement of the airport. And this is mostly handled through permit fees, as you may or may not be familiar with. And then finally, the flying clubs. This was another one that came out of the Federal Register notice that really, I would say, rocked the industry nationwide, where it stated that they can provide flight instruction through an independent flight instructor to those club members, as long as the instructor is a member of the club themselves or a permittee of the airport. So just again, to touch on the definitions of what each of these three groups are for the greater good of this conversation. Next slide, please. So as I alluded to, this is almost a repeat of the slide from last month, but we did complete our first meeting on May 12th, 2021. I walked away feeling it was a success. I received no comment to the contrary, so I'm very pleased to report on that. I'm working with Mr. Trimborn right now to come up with the schedule for the next set of meetings. And again, we believe there'll be at least 3 more meetings, and we're going to start to focus on what each of those are. Independent flight instruction, flying schools, flying clubs. But I think, kind of back to one of my earlier comments, we need to focus on the fact that this is more of a commercial type focus, which is why the airport minimum standards conversation is so critical to our success here and the associated updates. So the schedule will be announced as soon as we can all come to agreement. Clearly, as you saw by the member list, there's quite a few of us. So I'm gonna have to first off ensure Mr. Trimborn's availability, and then we'll reach out to the rest of the group to make sure we have full participation. Next slide, please. So what did we talk about in the introductory meeting? Again, goals, objectives, and then general meeting availability. So I have some ideas of general availability of the various members, and we're going to do our best to accommodate that. No promises that I can accommodate everyone for every single meeting, but we're going to do our darndest to make sure that we can ensure full participation, because it is of utmost importance that people understand the conversation from meeting 1 to meeting 4, because if you've missed one meeting, then you don't have the full context, and full context as we continue this discussion is of utmost importance. Again, we talked about what are airport minimum standards. I've just gone over that with you. And again, as Henry alluded to, we believe that all 3 stakeholder groups can operate here successfully. It may not be divided equally, but we will do our best to ensure that there's a fair and level playing field. Finally, my last goal here that we need to achieve is full airport regulatory compliance. We must achieve that this time around. That is the end game. And then you can rest assured, I will not be back here talking about flight instruction with you every single month once we can achieve a successful outcome here. We also decided that it would be best to have the task force working group in person. Virtual format was okay at best, but as you know, just simple. You look at these commission meetings, I think we do a pretty good job of all coming together and being respectful. And while there was great respect in that meeting, there's something about being in person and sitting across the table from your counterparts and understanding their perspective in person. So we will be moving to an in-person format. Of course, social distancing guidelines as dictated by the state at the time of the meetings and the public health department. So next slide, please. So again, focusing on deliverables. What was it that the group needed in the last meeting? Well, they obviously needed to be familiar with the airport's commercial minimum standards. So I was able to get these documents out today. The compliance manual, 5190.6 Bravo, if anyone has an interest in flipping through a few hundred pages of information, you can certainly find that on the FAA's website. Again, that's FAA Order 5190.6 Bravo, and that governs how an airport will maintain regulatory compliance with our grant assurances and how we will operate the airport. But one document that I didn't include on here is that Federal Register notice that I referred to that occurred back in 2016-17 that updated the ability for the ways that flight instruction is conducted on the airport. So I also shared that with the group. I'll also put out there that these documents are easily available to any of you. I'd be happy to share them with you if you would like. And if there are other documents that are going to aid in our path to compliance, I'm happy to dig those up. And then one of the points that Mr. Trimborn raised at the end of the meeting is that he felt that we really needed to dive into what airport minimum standards are a little bit more thoroughly. And that's why I touched on that earlier in this presentation, is because I think one of our first meetings, we're really going to dive into what they are, what minimum standards are, what they regulate on an airport, and how they are applicable to each of these three groups. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. I appreciate your attention tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. Mo, do we have any members of the public with raised hands, or would you solicit same, please?
Members of the public, if you would like to speak on this item, we have a raised hand, one, Chair Arcuri, Vincent Merstick.
Hello, am I unmuted?
Hold on, Vince, just a moment. You're unmuted, but hold on just a moment. Mo, do we have any others?
No, that's the only raised hand.
Okay, Vince, go ahead. You have the floor.
Maybe a limited number because of that technical issue I brought up a few minutes ago. One thing it seems to me that's important to this meeting, it was brought up at the last meeting that nowhere in these meetings are the users of the airport represented. The users being the students and the potential students. And they're very seriously affected by what the outcome of this process is. It will determine to a large extent financially, it will have a large financial burden on them depending on how this comes out possibly. And it's very unfortunate that they are not represented. So my question is there any reason why the public should not be able to witness these task force meetings? I can see where perhaps you might not want to have them speak at these meetings, but I can see no reason why transparency shouldn't prevail, and that other commissioners as well as the public ought to be able to listen into these meetings. Can you give me a reason as to whether or not you're planning to do this? And if not, what your logic is? Thank you.
Okay, Vince, thank you very much. Mo, do we have anybody else with a raised hand?
There are no other raised hands.
All right, so we'll move on to commission members then, and questions or comments, starting with Commissioner Hopkins.
Yes, several. First of all, Aaron, I would like to say that I heard a lot of very good things in this presentation, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that hopefully you will be able to achieve all of those objectives. As Vince mentioned, I was disappointed. I believe at the last meeting we discussed the possibility of pilots being added, and I think 4 out of the 7 commissioners supported that idea. So I am a bit disappointed that the pilots are not a part of this task force, but I hope that you will make sure to very actively include them at some later point in the discussion. The other item I have is your page 3 of your flight instruction task force, and it's the definitions, which are a little of flight school and independent flight instructors, which are a little different than I had typically thought of them. And I wondered if you'd comment. My definition in the past of a flight school was the flight school had owned airplanes and had flight instructors and gave instruction in their own airplanes. That is typically airplanes owned by the flight school. Independent flight instructors were specifically prohibited from giving instruction in their own airplane. They could only give instruction in an airplane owned by the person that was receiving the instruction. That was separate from the concept of who leased land or offices on the field, although typically what you listed here was true. Flight schools leased land, independent flight instructors typically did not, but I wasn't sure that was a requirement or a prohibition? Can you comment? That's all of my comments.
So Commissioner Hopkins, I'm happy to address that. So if a independent flight instructor were to provide their own aircraft for the purpose of flight instruction, they would essentially be operating as a flight school and an aircraft rental operation, which would be prohibited by being permitted as an independent flight instructor. So if you wanted to rent your aircraft out, you would have to be permitted as an aircraft rental operation or an aircraft flight school that conducts rental operations.
I agree completely. It's just that your definition doesn't distinguish. Your definition on page 3 doesn't make that point. And I think it would be good to, that is, I think, the primary difference between a flight school and an independent flight instructor is the aircraft ownership. Is that not true?
So let me address this, please. So you're correct on both points. Slide number 3 is an attempt by our consultant to better define for the members of the group what each of them are defined as. What you're describing is the specific requirements that we have for each of these groups currently in our existing minimum standards. And they're similar, but again, we're looking at updating the minimum standards. So some of those requirements may even change throughout this process here. So again, page 3, that's not necessarily language you're familiar with, because our consultant drafted that language to try to help everyone understand or compartmentalize how each one of those were defined. So, and I don't think he's far off from, what the intent is, but our minimum standards do have very specific requirements as you stipulated.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Chair Curry.
Okay, Commissioner Goodman.
No questions.
And Commissioner Houghton.
No questions.
Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you, Henry and Aaron. It looks like all is well and progressing as we could hope. Thank you. No questions.
Vice Chair Bowen.
Questions and comments, or comments leading to a question. First off, Aaron, good luck with this. You've got a tough job here. I'm really hoping that the staff and you can pull this together. The issue of knowledge of what's happening in your group, it interests pilots very much. And speaking as an airport commissioner and as a local active pilot, we have a stake in this and want to know what's going on. I understand that you don't want to have too many voices in the room, but whatever you can do to make this process more transparent to all of the user community would be greatly appreciated. And I guess I'm just asking if you have any ideas how you can achieve that without ruining your group.
Certainly, I'm happy to address that. My goals and objectives are to utilize the knowledge of our airport staff, airport leadership, airport consultant who is focused on the commercial aspect portion of this, and for the task force to come together with a recommendation for how they can coexist, all three together, because to your point, the pilots do have a stake. That is acknowledged. And the transparency in that process can be achieved through the meetings that we're having tonight, where if there's thoughts or ideas, again, we've only had an introductory meeting thus far. There will be additional meetings. And as you know, I come back to you every month with an updated report. So I assure you, you will see transparency in that manner.
And let me add further to that. We heard your comments and suggestions at last month's meeting. We heard public comments. We considered all of those. and ultimately made the decision that if we're going to have the best chance of getting these three groups to work collaboratively together, all in the same room, we have to be able to manage this group as best as possible. We have to make sure that they're free to communicate amongst each other. And so for that reason, and the reason stipulated by Councilman Friedman last month, we felt this group gives us the best chance to be productive and successful. Now, having heard what everyone has commented on in respect to pilots, most of the folks in the room there are pilots. So they're looking at it from a number of perspectives. From the perspective of the users, there will be opportunities outside of this particular group for users and pilots to contribute to the process. But again, what we found following the last commission meeting is we had a number of requests to join this task force group. And if we had entertained one, we would have to entertain the next one. And if we entertained those two, we'd have to invite another one. And the numbers just kept growing and growing. And there was no way we'd be able to manage this group and meet our objectives if we continued to add folks. So this is intended to focus, laser focus on getting these individuals to a common ground. Because again, the reason we're here in the first place is because of the infighting amongst this group. So if we can, calm the waters, so to speak, or sky, and at least get these folks, on the same page, then we believe we'll have a better chance as we move forward. So pilots, users, anyone else interested, ample opportunity coming up in our public outreach to be heard.
Well, thank you for detailing that out for me, Henry. And Aaron, we'll all wait patiently to hear your next monthly report. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, last but not least, myself. Just a brief question, and I think this is a repeat. I may have even asked it myself, and I apologize if it is a repeat from a prior question from a prior meeting. The consultant we're working with, Henry, part A is what is that firm or specifically that consultant's background that qualifies him to help us with this process? And B, actually, I'll just leave it at that.
So Aaron shared the background, the company he works for, and his experience. He can go over that again if you would like.
Maybe, Aaron, if you could just briefly do that, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. So this is Aviation Management Consulting Group. They're based out of Colorado. Mr. Turnborn, being a Southern California resident, while he works for this consultancy firm, he maintains a residence here between us and LA. So he has the availability to drive up, be present in these public meetings that we so desperately need him to facilitate. He started in the industry in 1983. He's been around the block. He was airport director at the Santa Monica Airport, where he handled many challenges to include, runway safety area improvements, to noise issues, all the way to the closure of his airport, which unfortunately is upon the horizon. He retired, don't quote me on the number of years. I want to say he retired 5 or so years ago. He spent some time at the Reno Stansted Airport as airport director there as well. So he understands compliance. He's got a very strong working relationship with the FAA LA ADO. So, who better to come in as a neutral third party to come in and facilitate these meetings and ensure that we're providing the best services here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for recapping that again. Henry, do you see the consultant's job, which, you know, we have him here as a facilitator, as somewhat, you know, a very knowledgeable kind of third party that doesn't have skin in, you know, any part of the game? Or are we looking for him to be more directive, meaning, you know, you should do this or you shouldn't do that? What is, how do you view his participation in terms of output, I guess?
So it's a little bit of both. The first objective that he has is to facilitate for us. So he's going to facilitate the task force working group meetings. We'll probably have him facilitate some of the public outreach meetings. He'll be preparing reports that are coming out of each of these meetings. Throughout the process, he will also be providing us consultant services, advice on things. He'll be validating a lot of the decisions that we're making. As Aaron mentioned, he has a lot of experience in the area of compliance. He's worked with the LA office of the FAA quite a bit. So he has perspective, he has experience, real world hands-on experience dealing with complex issues similar to this. So he'll be serving multiple purposes.
All right, thanks, Henry. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody who cares about this issue recognizes that there's a lot of pressure behind it, and so you know, an industry veteran as a third-party facilitator and consultant is obviously going to be very helpful. So I don't have any other questions. And given that, we have reached the end of the agenda. So just make the comment that the next Airport Commission meeting is scheduled for June 16th, 2021 at 6 p.m. I don't know yet if we'll be having that via Zoom or in person. But at any rate, we'll hope to see all the members of the public there. Thank you to all the participants, both at the airport, on the commission, and the members of the public. And this meeting is adjourned.